So we're picking it up from your mom's illness.
Would it be terribly upsetting to you if I go back a little bit first?
Certainly.
Fill in some
Sure.
blanks?
Sure.
Because we talked a little bit about music last time, and I hadn't reviewed any of that, and I thought it might help, just so you know how that was part of all of this happening. I was sort of a boy soprano and went to church. I don't remember any involvement in church until we moved during high school. But at that point, there was a church just across the street and up about 40 or 50 yards, a Moravian church. And I was singing in the choir there. And that's where I got most of my involvement in singing before I got to high school, or as I was getting into high school. And so I actually enjoyed that enough that my parents arranged for me to have voice lessons. So while in high school, I was taking voice lessons for a while. Then I told you about how I didn't go out for the choir at high school, but rather got asked to join. And so I did, and that went on through into college. So when I was in college, my one real extracurricular activity was the Lafayette College Choir, which was fairly famous locally. So that meant I was involved in, I had to go to church every Sunday because the choir was part of, this was a Presbyterian school. The religiosity was really diminishing, but if you're going to sing in the choir, besides doing all the secular stuff, we had to go to every Sunday morning deal. So a lot of us in college came in. I wasn't hungover, but a lot of us came in hungover or very tired after having been out on a date the night before. And I was chosen to be a member of the quartet. So I was the baritone in the quartet. And the quartet itself, we sometimes went off to alumni functions or other functions representing the school. So I was fairly involved in singing. I had my share of solos and so on. And that was part of the high school experience as well, since we were in the glee club together. Ardith played the violin, sort of, but you couldn't be in the glee club and the orchestra at the same time because they usually played together. So she decided she'd rather sing, and so we were together in band and in the glee club. So there were several ways we could see each other. Okay. So back then to where we stopped last time. My mother died in the spring of 1960. She was 51 at that point. It's just after her birthday, I think, that she died. And so my senior year, that meant that summer, by the way, I would come home most weekends. She would do my laundry. So I had to learn how to do all of that, which was not a particular problem, but it meant that weekends at home were more strained than they usually had been, of course. Meanwhile, I was applying for medical school. Did we cover this before?
No.
Again, okay.
No medical school yet.
Okay.
Nor have we covered how your relationship changed with your father after your mother's passing.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, actually, I think he began to understand that he was now even more alone than he we thought, because both my sister and I were leaning away from him, of course. When my mother died, at the funeral, he sat down between us, my sister on one side, me on the other. He grabbed our hands and he looked at each other of us and told us how much he loved us. I don't ever remember hearing that before. It affected me because I thought, well, it's about time, but this really is kind of a desperate act. Thought, and I was feeling very sorry for him, but unable myself to get very lovey-dovey with him.
Thank you, Ardith.
So we were kind of a little closer. He was a little more kind, I think, than he had been before. But it was clear that this was a difficult time for him. So I would come home on the weekends. He would pick me up, bring me home. Most of the time I'd have a date with Ardith. She usually came home. My house was about 5 or 6 miles from the college where I was going.
I'm having trouble hearing anytime she licks.
Mm-hmm.
So when she licks, we'll just take a break for a sec. Yeah, it's easy to upset the microphones and exceed their thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the way this pretty much was arranged is that most weekends, not all, Ardith would come home. If we had exams or other things, would keep us away. We had decided to go to separate schools because we thought if we were at the same school, we would really be distracted too much. And for both of us, the academics were important, especially for me because I needed to get into medical school. So I had to have a high grade point average. And there were lots of people who were smarter than me, and it just meant I had to work harder to do that. So Ardith would come home, and then I would have to try to get the car. My father had 2 cars. He had one for his own personal use, and then one he used in his practice, sort of around. He had a Studebaker for his practice because he didn't want to have any sort of fancy car. And he was just at the point, I think, where he was beginning to make some money, because whether I would be able to go to college and live there was a big issue among my parents. My mother warned me that they might not be able to afford that, but it turns out they eventually did. So she managed the books and managed somehow to make sure that I could live on campus. And told her about Ardith then occasionally being asked to watch The Office while I went out with my father. That was particularly true later when he remarried, right?
No,
No, it was before. Yeah, it was before. So Ardith would take care of The Office on sometimes if you were there during the week, especially over the summer. And on my father's day off, she would answer the phones, do the filing, that sort of stuff.
Did your father's interactions with you or method of talking to you change after your mother's passing?
Not in any real material way. They did very much around the time of the funeral. But, you know, I didn't even know that she was in her final days. He didn't tell me that. I knew, of course, she was quite ill, and a few times when he was on call and she was at home not feeling well, a few times I just stayed there and didn't go to school for the Sunday morning service and the choir singing, right? To be with her. So I knew things were getting worse. But then when it really looked like she was about to pass on, then I never knew about that. I just heard about it after. And, you know, I was only a few miles away. So my father then described, he was at her bedside and said, you know, he was holding her hand and she was having trouble breathing, and then took one big final breath and let it out, and that was it. So I got that description, but you know, we didn't. We're sort of that Anglo-Saxon approach. We're not externally emotional.
Okay, I'm going to shut this system down here.